Do you have tragedies or traumas or losses from your past that you feel responsible for, that you still feel guilt for, and are beating yourself up over? These are very important things to get to the bottom of, because what happens is oftentimes we think we have more power than we do. We think there were things that we could have done differently that would have made an enormous difference. But is this true? I'm going to be talking about all this and more in this video, so stay tuned. My name is Adam. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before we get started, please take a second to like and subscribe. And I am doing free breakthrough calls for anybody who's interested and feels called. There's a link pinned in the comment section below. What these are 30-minute calls where we will go over your vision for your life, what you're looking to create, what's stopping you and blocking you from bringing it into reality, and then some steps that you can take, actionable steps you can take to clear everything up so that you can begin to create the life that you want. Now, loss and grief, regret and guilt, these are very deep-seated and tricky emotions to let go of. There are so many times that things happen in our lives where we feel responsible, or we feel in retrospect like we could have done something different that would have impacted the reality, that would have impacted the outcome. And we can get stuck in these loops going, what if I had, or what if I hadn't, or what if I had? And it's a very tricky thing to navigate, because the truth is we don't know. We don't know what would have happened different if we did something different. Maybe it would have been a change. Maybe it would have been the same. The other thing that we do is we forget that we didn't know in the moment that we're regretting what was going to happen later. We didn't know that person was going to die. We didn't know the house was going to burn down. If we didn't know any of that. So of course, in retrospect, we can go back and be like, oh, well, if only I had done this, but you never know. So I'm going to tell a quick story about when my dog died when I was 9 years old, because this experience led me to beat the living shit out of myself for many, many years. I felt incredibly guilty and incredibly responsible. And then I'm going to share what I learned from this experience in hopes that it will help you unravel some of the parts of yourself that are still beating themselves up for things that you did or didn't do in whatever scenario that you can relate to this with. So I grew up with a number of Dobermans from the time I was very little. And we had this one, his name was Mo, okay? That was his name. And he was about nine years old. And when I was 9 years old, we were the same age, right? And I really love this dog. I love this dog a lot. And we lived in a house where we had a pretty big backyard, and my parents would let the dogs out, and they'd run around, and then they'd come in and eat dinner or whatever. And one day, the Mo got out. Okay, so he got out because the gardeners had left the back gate open. Now, we lived in a residential neighborhood. It wasn't like right off a very busy street, but there were, some somewhat busy streets nearby. So we found that the gate was open and he was missing, and we went looking for him. We went driving around the neighborhood trying to find him, and it was my mother and my sister and I, and it didn't take very long before we saw him just running down the street. So we had this sort of minivan at the time. We opened the door, we called him into the car, he came in, and we brought him back to the house. Now, there was a little bit, the gate was a little bit messed up, so that's why it didn't shut and latch all the way. And my father, needed to fix this. But before he had time to fix it, what he did was he told the gardeners, listen, you have to make sure you close and latch this gate because our dog got out. He told them this. It was Tuesday, and then, between the time that they came back the next time. He explained it very clearly. Following Tuesday comes, and I remember I was playing baseball at the time. It was summer, summer break. I was at baseball practice. I remember coming home and being very, very exhausted because we worked really hard and we had a really good time too. It was this weird night where, I don't know if you guys know what slip and slides are, if they still exist, but back in my day, we had these things where you would lie them down get them wet, and you just kind of slide across them. So we had baseball practice for like an hour, and then we had this really enjoyable time where we just ran around like the field with the sprinklers on, sliding on these slip and slides. And this is significant too. I'll get to why in a second. So I came home that night and I was just worn out. And I had always struggled with fatigue, always. I'd always been super tired. I've talked about this in some of my other videos. I never felt like moving. I never felt like doing anything. I never felt good enough. Like physiologically, I felt like shit most of my life, even though I did run around and play too. So we get home and I'm lying on the couch watching The Wonder Years. I'll never forget this. And both of the dogs, we had two, were in the backyard and I saw them. And I will never forget, I sat there lying down going, recalling the Tuesday before, because this was a Tuesday night, going, maybe I should go out and check the gate just to make sure it's shut, because last Tuesday the gardeners came, right, and they didn't close the gate. And I sat there and I was really tired. And I debated in my head, because I was lying there like just worn out, and I decided, nah, you know what? My dad just told them to shut the gate. I'm sure they shut the gate if they were just instructed to do so. I don't need to go check it. Everything is fine. So I'm sitting there for another 20 minutes watching, TV. And my dad was out of town at this point. My mom comes down, opens the door, and goes to call for the dogs. Well, the little one, who was not Mo, comes running into the house. Mo doesn't come in. My mom keeps calling. He doesn't come in. We walk around the back to see that the gate is open, and he's gone. So we get in the car, we go driving around for like an hour and a half. We can't find him. Finally, we're driving kind of pretty far from the house, and we see these people walking down the street, and we pull over and we're like, hey, did you see a big red Doberman anywhere? And they're like, oh yeah, I think we saw one up the road a little bit. So we drive up the road, and I'll never forget this moment. It was 11:22 was the time in the blue, Honda Accord that we had. I'll never forget looking at the clock and looking and seeing Mo on the side of the road, dead. My uncle was with us. My uncle got his body, put it in the back of the trunk, and I was devastated. This was like the first big death that I ever went through. I could not stop crying. I remember very significantly, I was not very aware of like being an empath or anything like that, or spirituality at the time. But I remember the next morning, my heart feeling like I could feel a lot more before that day. I could feel a lot more love before that day. And I remember the next day it being different. But what I remember significantly was blaming myself. Because what if I had just gotten up off the couch and gone and checked the gate while he was still in the backyard? He would still have been alive. And I internalized that so fucking deeply, and I forgot about it. And I want to invite you to look at any situations in your past where you have something like this, where this happened, because this will put a monkey wrench in everything. It will put a monkey wrench in your ability to love other people, to receive love within yourself, to attract partners, to attract a successful career. Because if you're beating yourself up for causing the death of something else when you actually didn't, I'm going to explain why in a second, it ruins everything. Like, the main reason why we don't create the lives that we want is because some part of us is beating ourselves up for something. It's really self-forgiveness. So what did I learn from this situation? And it took me many years. It wasn't until I did my first somatic healing trauma session that I didn't even know what was going to come up. And what came up was this, was when my dog died. It was very hard for me because I didn't understand like how it wasn't my fault. Like, how was it not my fault? And essentially what I came to know is We, like I said, we never know what's going to happen in a moment. Like he very well could have been fine. Like they should have shut the gate. The gardeners had just been told to shut the gate. The fact that I rationalized, oh, I'm tired and, everything's probably going to be all right, made sense. And what I came to understand is there are other things going on in these moments than what we understand on a human level. Souls, animals, humans, whatever, have contracts that last an extended period of time. And when it's time for someone to go, they go. And if it's time for them to stay, they stay. This is very important. I had a soul coach who once explained to me, a friend of mine, that like souls will have like an exit date. So like they're going to die at the age of 88. Where free will comes in is if you treat yourself really well and you learn all the lessons, you might have a really healthy life, and then in 88 you just suddenly die. And if you don't, and you're not working on yourself and you're not learning the lessons, at 75 you might manifest a really gnarly disease and you'll waste away until 88, and then you'll die. You die at the same time either way. It's just kind of how it goes. So what I had to come to understand was this was going to happen regardless. It was going to happen regardless of what decision I made. It's why he got out one day and he got out the next week. There wasn't anything I could have done except to process the guilt and the shame that I had around not doing enough. Another lesson that I learned is that souls, animals, etc. will literally sign up to teach us this lesson. So if I had a habit of being overly responsible and guilty, which is a long-standing soul pattern of mine, he very well would sign up to trigger this response in me, to create a scenario where I went into beating myself up and blaming myself so later I could let it go and learn the lesson of self-forgiveness, because me forgiving myself for that situation also encompasses a whole bunch of other beliefs, patterns, habits, situations, lifetimes, realities, and realms all at once. And when I can truly let go and forgive myself from a place of love, I heal more than any other way. So instead of me being at fault for him dying, he actually left. This is a whole different story. He left to help me learn how to forgive myself so that I could heal. This is how the souls work here. The other thing that so I would invite you to ask, if there was a loss in your life and you felt you could have done something different, what is the gift or lesson that the higher self of the person or animal that left was trying to teach you? And it's always in regards to love. It's always in regards to how you can love yourself more, forgive yourself more, let yourself off the hook. The other thing I came to understand is this was many, many years ago. As of now, he would have been dead either way. He was going to leave at some point. He was 9.5 years old. Dobermans, big dogs, tend to live between 9 and 15 years. That's not to say I wouldn't have liked to have another year or two with him. Of course I would, but now it wouldn't have mattered. On a soul level, we were okay then, and we're okay now, and we're always okay. How it plays out here isn't as significant as we think. Things generally happen because they were meant to happen. We think there's all these little things or steps we can take to change it, but not really. If the karma is there, if the path is there, if the soul contract is designed that way, it's going to happen when it's time to happen. And that's to be said for good things and tragedies. So if you're beating yourself up for something that you feel you did or didn't do or could have done differently, and I'm not saying like, if you killed someone, like, that you didn't have a part in that. I'm more talking to the level of like, these little situations where we could have done something or didn't do something, or a choice we could have made. But even on the significant ones, on some level, all of it is meant to play out. And in the end, we are all ultimately okay. And something that you can do is ask to be connected to the higher self or the soul of the person or the animal that you lost. and meditate on this and ask what their message is for you, because it's always going to be around forgiveness, and it's always going to be around something that they had to offer you in the way of you learning to love yourself more and to have a better life. They don't want you to suffer. They don't want you to beat yourself up. They came here to learn whatever it is that they went through, and you were just playing a part in that. And in the end, when we all realize that, and we all realize that we're all still connected, and that it's really only down here on the earth plane that we deeply suffer, and then in the end we're all right, it makes an enormous difference. And they would want you to move on, and they would want you to be happy, and they'd want you to call in a new family or a new animal or a new partner or whatever it is. And it's only us that keep beating ourselves up and thinking we have more power than we actually do a lot of times on the human level, that are holding us back. And one of the other things I wanted to point out here, which is a very tricky, sort of sneaky lesson, is, and the subconscious mind does this, so look out for this. Because I had come home from baseball practice and I had had a lot of fun, and then after being in that state where I had a lot of fun, there was this tragedy, my mind sort of linked the fun with the tragedy. And there was a part of me that, because I felt guilty for not getting up off the couch, I also felt guilty for feeling good that day. And what that does is it will then create a pattern, especially if this happened when you were young, where anytime you're up and you feel really good and it's exciting, you believe there has to be a crash, or it has to be followed by the other shoe dropping, either because you don't feel worthy of it, you don't feel deserving of it, you feel guilty, or just because you believe that's what happens because you've coupled the two together. So what you would want to do here is look for any sort of tragedy times in your past where you were feeling really good beforehand, and ask yourself if you have a hard time allowing yourself to feel good now because of that. And then you can ask your higher self or your spirit guides or whatever to neutralize the coupling of the fun and the excitement and the joy with the tragedy, because they do not need to go together. So let me know how this goes. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I have a free energy clearing in the description below if you'd like to download it. Please let me know if you have any comments, revelations, breakthroughs. Other than that, thank you very much. I appreciate the support, and I'll see you next time.